parents and valuing education over other things. But these values aren't just exclusive to Indian American students, right? All parents want their kids to succeed. They want their kids to be respectful, decent citizens of society. So, right, we must ask ourselves, why are Indian American students consistently the ones with higher test scores and better grades generally? There's several answers to these questions, but I think we can find the answer in history. So in the 1960s, 70s, early 80s, the Prime Minister of India was a lady named Indira Gandhi. And she had a lot of socialist policies that we see now in South America and other nations that hurt the economy. So there was a pretty large exodus of Indian intellectuals and educated people to the United States and all over the world. As those people, like Shovanti, my parents later on, as they came to the United States, they, in their own children, instilled values of valuing education. And economic studies will show that the children of people who are educated tend to be successful themselves. And so, looking at the history of Indian Americans and looking at the history of educated people in general, it makes sense that Indian students in the United States will have better grades and test scores. So while we as Indian Americans would love to believe that there's something fundamentally different about our parenting values and methods that lead to success, history repeatedly reminds us that while our values are generally good, we're lucky to be products of economically successful people themselves. We're lucky that America accepted our ancestors, our parents, our grandparents, and not unlike God himself in the book of Ruth, right? He said, Ruth said, "I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to me, your servant, though I am not one of your servants." Our parents, our grandparents came to the United States even though they weren't American, but America accepted them, and we want to serve America. While we as Americans, we as people would love to believe that the times of discrimination and racism have passed, they haven't. They've gotten better, much better, far better, but they haven't fully gone away. As a student at both Mason and at Cincinnati Country Day, I have at times felt different from my white peers. Especially when I was younger, I sometimes didn't understand cultural references to movies, TV shows, old songs, and I didn't know what to say as when people asked me what my favorite song was, what my favorite old movie was. I didn't really know what to say. I was confused. Sometimes Christian references themselves confused me. On Grandparents' Day, I didn't know what to do. My grandparents were thousands of miles away. And sometimes when I felt that I wasn't being included, I thought that something was wrong with me. I wanted to hide my culture. I wanted to hide my feelings, hide who I was, in favor of assimilation. I can't blame my peers or my teachers, because how could they know what I was going through? I didn't say anything. I couldn't reasonably expect them to know how I felt when I didn't myself say anything. But I hope that discussions like this one and tough conversations, through those, we can strengthen our connections with each other and our feelings with each other. And at that time, we can strengthen society itself at the individual, person-to-person level. George Washington wrote in his Rules of Civility and Decent Behavior that a good person must labor to keep alive in his heart that little celestial fire called conscience. Now, that's kind of a really advanced quote, at least for me, but I think that this event and conversations like this are a glowing branch, a flame in the fire of society. And through these, we improve the experience not only for students, but for all people. So in the 4th grade, it was Veterans Day in the fall, and we students had to stand in the hallways, wait for the Veterans Day parade. And I went to Mason Intermediate School back then, and our teachers had all given us small American flags to hold and wave as the band of veterans and the band came. And I was waiting for the regal sounds and all of that, along with the rest of my classmates lining the halls. And when I heard a sharp "Manav" come from behind me, and of course she didn't actually say Manav, she said Manav. That's just minor, but it turns out that I had been holding my flag upside down, and I had to, as a result of that, I had to sit in the classroom while the rest of the class enjoyed the Veterans Day parade. Now, and they called my parents, as my dad can remember, and now, of course, I shouldn't have been holding the flag upside down, but I didn't know that. No one had told me. It was expected that every other student knew that because their parents had told them, and they knew that, but I hadn't. My parents were immigrants. They didn't know that, but the teacher still expected me to possess that knowledge. So while I can discuss lots of other examples like the one that I just explained, I'd like to share some advice with you all that I think could strengthen the experience in the classroom, not only for Indian American students, but for all students and teachers themselves. So first, I alluded to this earlier, but please try to pronounce names. I know sometimes when I see Indian names, it's like, what? they're 25 letters long, or all that. But if there's ever a complicated name, maybe before the class starts, or before the beginning of the year, maybe approach that student privately and ask, how would you like it to be pronounced? Or do you have a nickname that you prefer? And oftentimes they do. And that just helps make everyone feel included and helps to strengthen the level of conversation in the classroom. So second, please understand that Indian American students, like all racial minorities and all minorities, don't like to be placed into groups based off of that designation. And sometimes it's called affinity groups or etc. But that we are individuals, and just like all students, like to express our individual thoughts. So third, please explain your reasoning for certain decisions, like my 4th grade teacher who expected me to have knowledge based off of upbringing that I didn't. And so by explaining why we do certain things, why certain American values exist, American traditions, it'll help bring children of immigrants into the culture and help make it a better classroom environment. My 4th piece of advice is, I think it's my favorite piece of advice. It's my most important piece of advice, but it's that don't assume that just because Indian American students perform well in the classroom, that they're free from mental illness and free from mental health issues. Just yesterday, I was driving back from a school event over the weekend with two of my friends, a gay Hispanic boy and a white girl. And we shared it with each other in an almost a cathartic experience that about how we felt, our mental health, our outlook on life itself. And after the talk, we all felt better. We all felt that despite our outward differences, we shared a common understanding of loneliness sometimes. But by having that conversation, we were able to surpass that and strengthen each other. So Indian American students despite oftentimes performing well in the classroom, do experience the same feelings as students of all other races and all other groups. So I urge you all to incorporate in your classrooms methods to bring students together through tough conversations, especially tough conversations that strengthen the classroom for all. And so my fifth piece of advice is to ask questions. I love to ask questions. I've always loved to ask questions. Sometimes it got me into trouble. When I was in third grade, my teacher had to put a limit on my questions. I could ask five questions a class, and beyond that, I had to write them down. But if you're unsure of a cultural element or simply want to learn more about something, do not hesitate to ask Indian American students or any student about that. We love to share. In fact, some of my teachers have been, or some of my favorite teachers have been those who have showed the vulnerability to ask me questions. And I've loved growing close with my teachers through those conversations. Just by attending this talk, you've shown your appreciation for our Indian American culture and your love of education and your profession. I, and by proxy all students, thank you for becoming a teacher. It's one of the most important professions, profound careers needed for the maintenance of democracy, not only in America, but in the world. Through education, we will be able to surpass discrimination and be able to tackle and solve all of the problems that have beset our society. We're profusely lucky that all of you have decided to enter into this noble profession. Thank you to Dr. Sehi, to Shovanti, Mr. Tom, for allowing me to be here, and I'd love to answer your questions now. So does anyone have any questions? Who has questions? Thank you.